Hello there, my name is Utibe Etim. So I'll be giving you a walk down of the project we are asked to build, the AAD Google Africa Developers Phase 2 practice project. And my walk down will be purely on Kotlin. So if we are to check the doc which we were given, so the things we will be understanding on this project will be multi-activity project, view pager, customized toolbar, RecyclerView, making a network request, and then working with Google Forms and more. So we've been given the best URL which we are going to use on the project, and then we are to call this endpoint, these two endpoints, to get the list of learning leaders and the list of skill IQ leaders. And if we go down, we have the submission page which we have the best URL to submit our work, and then the response, and this is the full URL. And this is like an example of how we are going to do the implementation for the submission. And going down, we have the screen. So starting from the splash screen to the main activity, which we have the leaders and the skill IQ list, then the submission, and then the dialogues here. Okay, so moving to my system, we have, this is the app here. So if I can launch it, you see from the splash screen here. So from the splash screen, you load up the main activity that has the view pager. So if we can go through the walk down on the project, I have added some dependencies to help me in the project. So here are the dependencies: view pager for these tabs that we have here to be able to navigate between the two fragments inside one fragment. We use view pager. And then we have the navigation component, which is the navigation graph for Kotlin, because I'm using Kotlin for this project. So we using navigation to move from one fragment to the other, like. Then we have the retrofit dependency, which is what helps us call the endpoint that we were given to be able to have these details here. Then the last one that I've used here is glide. So glide is what I've used to these images down here successfully. So we have other dependencies that we can use to load up images, but I prefer glide. I think glide is the best for me. So I like using glide. So that's it for the dependencies I've used. For moving down to the colors, I've changed the colors down here. So based on the project, we're using black colors for everything background. So I've decided to use the color for color primary and black color for color primary dark, and then color accent, I've decided to use this, and then the white color for text. Most of the text you can see, like the skill IQ leaders is white color, the learning leaders is white colors, then the leaderboard is using a white color also. So I use the white color there. Then if you check the button here, it's using a white background, so it's from the white color. And then if you go to the summit screen, we are using a kind of a yellow or orange color, so that's why we have here and here. Alright, okay, so that's it. So if you go to from creating the splash screen So here I want to believe that you know how to create your activity, how to create your project, and then how to create your fragments. But if you don't know, I can just give you a little walk down of that. So if you go to new and go down here, you see activity. Then you can create an empty activity. What this does is that it will create the activity and the layout for you at once, saving you the time of creating activity differently and creating a layout differently. Same thing for fragment. So empty fragment will create an empty fragment for you with the layout for that fragment. If you've not used fragment before, it's just like using an activity, and you will see how fragment can be used on this walk down project. Okay, so that's it on how to create an activity and fragment. So I've created a splash screen activity. So a splash screen here is an activity. I have only two activity on this project here, which is the main activity and the splash screen activity. So on the splash screen I added a little delay, so that once the splash screen loads up, like it loads, you can be able to see the little delay, so you'll be able to see the splash screen perfectly as it is. So without the delay, you just load up maybe like a second or two, you will move to the next screen. So the delay helps keeps the screen for 3 seconds before it moves to main activity. So this is how I handle the delay, by using an handler dot post delay. Then I added the next intent inside the delay, then call the time for the delay. So like you can see, handler dot post delay in bracket, which is closed here, then the function here. I believe you understand that. So I've added a comment here. So for this particular walk down project, there is a repository in case of anything you do not understand right now. So you can go to the repository and check it out yourself and get to understand so many things you might not understand. And you can also get to ask questions on the channel, the Slack channel. My name there is Utibe, so ask any mentor that's on the Android channel, they will answer all your questions. So this is the repository I've created for this particular walk down project. Everything you need is here, right here. So if you're having difficulties or you can't get me, you can come here and check it out, and feel free to try stuff. Alright, so this is for splash screen, nothing much. On the XML, it just uses constraint layout for the whole parent layout. Then we use the color primary as the background color, which you know that color primary is black, and you can see the color over here. Then we have the image, the splash screen image here. So I've added an image view, then added the image. So here I've already added my drawables, which is what we have here. So we have the success, the question mark that we have on the success, and which you will get to see. We have the top learners images, which is this. We have the skill IQ images, which is just a second, which is this. And then we have the IC GADS, which you will get to see that later. Then the cancel button, this is an image that shows if your submission is not successful. So the red image that shows, which you get to see as we progress on the walk down. So these other ones are the customized drawables, which I've done for either buttons, or I'll show you as we go through this walk down. Okay, that being done, so you've seen that the splash screen is quite simple. Just the constraint layout as the parent layout and an image view. Finish. So the other work is done here, which is just the delay here, and that is done for the constraint layout. And this is the timer, which is 3 seconds here, not 1. So 3 seconds there. Okay, so from splash screen we go to main activity. So before you get to understand main activity, I have added some codes to handle our navigation components. So if you are not familiar with navigation component, you can come to this URL, check it out. So we have on Android. Yeah, so this doc has everything you need to know about navigation components. So these are the dependencies we've added on this project, as you can see right here, and many other things you can do with navigation component. Okay, to set up navigation component, has already shown you the dependency for navigation component, which is this. Then once you've added the dependency and sync your project, the next thing you need to do is to create a folder called navigation. So how to create this is simple, in case you don't know, so I'll just show you how that is done. Just right click on rest. Once you right click on rest, you can create a directory. So you name the directory navigation. Once you do that, this guy here will come up. So once you've created the navigation, inside the navigation you create a graph, kind of. So you just right click, if I want to try out, and you see navigation resource file, so you click on that, then you type in the name. So we already have main navigation graph. I can add something like second nav graph, so you see how it works. And okay, so once you okay, this comes up. To add your navigation, you just click on the plus button here, and you have all the fragments you have created for this project, even the activities too. So now you know how to create a navigation graph. So let's go to the main navigation graph and let me show you a walk down of what I did. So what I did here is just get the home fragment main, which is the main screen. So once you've gotten that, very easy, you can get another screen. So let's say we want to, for this app, you want to move from the navigation from the home fragment to submission fragment. So you just select that, click on this, and you have this little ball here comes out. So you can click on the ball and drag here. That gives you the navigation of moving from this screen to this screen. So if you go to the code pad, you see that the code has been generated for you to move from main fragment to submission fragment. As you can see the arrow to show that if you click here, you move down here. So that's just what I did here. So this is the navigation home, which is where we have the skill IQ and the learners list. So once you've gotten that, you just drag and then to the next screen. So from here we are moving down here. As you can see, the arrows points you to where you'll be moving down to. Okay, so let's end it there for now and go back and explain the other code. So we move from splash screen to main activity. So on the main activity, we created the nav graph. Creating the nav graph means we have to call the nav graph in our main activity. Then from the app, you can see that on our home screen we have this right here, and for us to be able to achieve this right here, which is on our toolbar, so we need to create our toolbar. And just to make it look nice for this our app, I use a coordinate layout to hold the parent view, then created an app bar layout to hold the toolbar. This makes it more flexible to use. It makes the app more solid to work with. So, and something else that I would like to show you here is that on the app here we have, see that on the toolbar we have leaderboard here and the submit button down here, and once you click on the submit button, you have this right here, which is like the Google Africa Developer Scholarship logo, and then the back button. So to be able to achieve this, I did a little tweak down here to make it easier for us to work with that, because they have to show simultaneously. Once the other one disappears, this other one shows, and if you don't handle it this way, it will be a bit hard for you, because I've tried that. So the best way to handle that is I added a constraint layout inside the toolbar to hold the first leaderboard and the submit button. Then I added second one inside a constraint layout, but what I did is hide this one. So if I can make you see, the second one is just to cut out the height and hide this first one, because the two cannot show together at the same time. So you can see that since the toolbar is not big enough to contain the two at once, so one has to overlap the other. Then if you leave the two to be visible, it means the first one will overlap the second one. So that's what is happening. It's either you hide one and show the other one of it. So I'll just undo that. So now you've seen the trick to handle the showing the text leaderboard and the submit button that you click to go to the submit screen, and then the image and all of that. Okay, so I added the back button, which is this arrow right here that is showing on the app, as you can see, this arrow right here. And then I used this logo, I imported it as an image drawable, so I used the image here too. That's the image here to show this. That is just it on how I'm handling these two toolbar here, to show one and hide the other. There is still a code part of it which I will show you as we go on. So you've seen the little trick I did here to handle that. Alright, so going to fragment home or main fragment. Main fragment is like a shadow of the main activity. So as you can see right here, main activity is not holding any view apart from the that is showing this. That's the only thing that main activity is showing in this whole project. So apart from that, main fragment is what is holding the views. This view pager are the two fragments. Okay, so let's walk down the fragment main and see how everything looks. So here you can see that I'm using a constraint layout as the parent layout here, and the width and the height are wrap. Then the context is main fragment, which is the fragment. Then I use the app bar layout here to hold the tab layout. What this does is just to make sure that the tab layout shows as an app bar, which makes it very simple for us to handle that, so that it won't give us issues running to one end and shifting to a position we won't like it. So the best way to handle it is use an app bar. Then the app bar has to be of background color primary, because color primary is using the black color, as you can see here. Then we add a tab layout. What tab layout does is to give us this app kind of, so if you click on it, it moves one end to the other. While what view pager, we use view pager here too. What view pager does is to help us swipe from one end to the other. So I can swipe here and swipe here, so it helps us on the swiping part of the area. So that's all about the main fragments. As you can see, nothing extraordinary here. In my tab bar here, I did a little customization to make sure that the tab here is white, to show that it is this tab that is active. So as you can see here, you see that I'm using color primary because it is black to shadow the background of the tabs. The tabs are black and the graffiti are filled, which means you can fill up the space we have here like match. Then the indicator color to be white, that's the white you are seeing, a little white here, to show that it is this particular tab. That then the mode is fixed, which means it cannot scroll. You can have the scroll one if you have much items here, like from 5 items you need to scroll it. The text color is white. We have to use white text color here because the background is black, so if the color is black too, it means you can't see anything. So that's why we are using the color here to be white, and that's why you're having the white color here as the text color. If we are using a default appearance here, you see that the letters here will be smaller. Or let me just see if I can try that out. So I'll just remove this in a while, run the app, so you see how it works. So this will take a moment. I'll just pause the app and zoom when it's done running. So our app is done running. So this is the default app before I remove the customization that I just removed here, and this is the result that is coming out. So you can compare the two apps and see how it looks. This starts with capital letters and small letters at the other part, while these are all caps. So you can see how that looks. But that's one line of code that I removed here changes the app to this. So let's see what was in that code that was removed. So in our styles, I added these 4 lines of codes for the tab layout. So as you can see, I named it custom tab appearance, and the parent is text appearance.design.tab. As you can see, I named it custom tab text appearance, and the parent is text appearance.design.tab. And what I did here is I used text all caps to be false, and Android text all caps to be false too, and then the text size to be 16 sp. And so if you need to increase the text size, you have that. Why did I have to add it here on the styles and not just type it here at once? Because this helps me in such a way that if I have like 10 screens doing this same action, like I want to have view pager in like another 10 screens, so I can just call this instead of having to write this code again and again and again. So you get that. So you can decide to write in your code or just do this and call it any way you want it in your application, and that works. Alright, so that's just it on what we have done on the fragment main, to be able to have both the tab layout and the view pager. And the view pager we are using here is view pager 2, not the normal view pager. So you can check the differences between view pager 2 and view pager. Go to the code pad and see how it works. So this is the code pad of it, and there is first thing first to implement adapter for it. If you see here, though I have added like folders to everything I'm working on. So you see here for the APIs, for the models, and for the views. And so I have adapters here for all the adapters that I've used in this application. So everything adapter is inside this folder. So we have the leader pager. This is the pager that controls moving from this screen to this screen. So let's open up and see what it. So the only thing we do here is add an activity, and the activity is fragment activity in this constructor, then call the view the fragment state adapter here, and call the activity that we declared here. So we declared the mutable list of fragments, and then mutable list of strings, which are the strings we will have here on the titles. So you can see that the fragment carries fragment list, which I will explain, and the strings carries a variable called the m fragment. Okay, and you might imagine how we're going to add it to the other fragments. So this particular function does help us add both the fragment and the titles. So we have two fragments here and the titles on those tab layouts that we have used there. So we just call the add fragment. In the constructor we call the fragment and a string called title. Then we add the variable we declared here and then add the variable we declared here for title, and that does the work. So we just add the title here and add the fragment here for the fragment list. Then item count, this is just to map how many screens we are going to use on the pager. It might be up to 5 screens, so this will just keep inflating the pager and the tabs for us. So once you swipe, it keeps generating the number of tabs and the number of swipes you have based on the fragment which you will attach to the view pager and the tab layout. So this just helps us create the list of fragments titles. So that's all about this leaders pager. You might call it leaders pager adapter or any how you want to name it, but the function here is just to map the content of what we will use for this pager and the title, like the fragment and the title on top of the pager and tab layout. Alright, so that being done, we go to the main fragment, and this is how the fragment is implemented. It's a normal fragment called. Then we declare the titles here in a list or in an array of the names we use. So let's say here we are using only 2 fragments, so we need only 2 titles. If you have up to 10 fragments, so you just keep adding them and just separating them with the comma, and you keep adding them. So but it has to tally with the number of fragments you will have on that particular view. So once you declare that, you now have to initialize it here. So what we did is we didn't do anything on onCreate. Most times I don't use onCreate when I'm working with fragments, and then I rarely use onCreate views too, but I like using on view created. It depends on how you want it. You can use any of it to do your implementation. So here we are using on view created to do our implementation. So I started writing this method here. So this method is just to map the fragments we will use, and it's just a process. But even if you add this without adding this title, the title will not show here. So this is like a constructor which you need to return it. You can remember that once when we did the add fragment, we had a fragment and a title, which is what we are using here, the fragment and the title of the fragment. But just adding the title here and not add it to the position will not show on the tablet. You can try that out on your spare time and how that works. So also there are so many ways you can implement this view pager, but I just decided to use this particular method because it's simple for me and it's straightforward. Kind of, it might not be straightforward for you. You might find another implementation that is more easier to use. So this is the pager adapter which we did, which is this class right here that we did. And then you just view pager.pager view pager.adapter equals to pager adapter, just like implementing a recycler. Then these other ones I will explain as we go. But what this does, if I can just jump in, is that I did a companion object here. What this does is that you can remember that in our toolbar we added two constraint layout, one for this and another one this particular toolbar. So this is just to handle that function for us. First thing first, this is supposed to help us show titles, but since we are not using titles here, but rather we are using tool, what they do is this hides this first toolbar when you are going to the submit screen. This particular function helps hide it. So if I go to the submit screen, so you see that on start, yes, right here, I hide the toolbar title, which is what was written here, hide toolbar title. So once you hide that, and inside the hide toolbar title, I showed that when you want to hide it, it will hide the leaders app bar, which is this one, and show the submit app bar, which is the one you get when you go to this order. So this is to show, which is the reverse of what this does. So as you can see here, it hides and here it shows. Here on the submit, when you go to the submit page, it shows. Then when you come back to the main activity, is gone. That's just what that does for this application. Then this is for navigation controller, which is what we write here in this main nav graph. You can still remember that the nav graph is what helps us move from the main screen to the submit screen, which is clicking here to get to here, and by clicking here we get to the dialogues that we have. You can see the full code that is used for the view pager, right? So after initializing the view pager right here from the adapter, so we use the adapter to add the fragments and the title, then view pager, which is what is called here .adapter. The adapter will add the view pager for us. So we just call the view pager here. You can actually do the same thing here and it will still work. So this tab this tab layout mediator is what handles the tapping on the screen. So when you tap from one screen to the other, is this particular function that handles that tapping. So as you can see, the tab layout mediator, and it carries the tab layout, and this is the idea of the tab layout that we declared here in the fragment main. If you still remember, tab layout to tab layout here, then the view pager is the idea of the view pager here. So the tab layout now carries the idea of the tab layout and the idea of the view pager. Then tab layout, that tab configuration strategy, then you add the tab layout, just initializing it with the position, and then add the title. So this is the text, the tab.text equals to the title, which is the title up here, the array of titles. And that is all for the main screen of the app. Right now we've not moved to the retrofit part. We'll move to the retrofit part right now. Let's check out how we initialize interface for retrofit, and before we get to calling the API. From here I have a package called API services, and this is where all my retrofit implementation and the API services is done. So if I can open the retrofit, okay, coming to our retrofit client, these are the two base URLs we have used so far. This is for the calling of the skill IQ and the top learners, and this is for the submission form. Then we just set up the retrofit.builder.best URL, which is calling the first best URL here. .converter, it helps convert the data you've added to retrofit and converts retrofit to the data you'll be sending to the API. Then .client and the HTTP client, which was declared here. Then retrofit.create the API. The API service class is the interface which we fetching our request from, which we be doing our retrofit calls. So as you can see, this is the interface API services, which is what is called here for the first best URL and the form submission. So this is our API interface, which help us make our retrofit requests for the 3 requests we need to call. So the first one is a get request, which we will call for to get the R's, and the second one is for the skill IQ, which we will call to get all the skill IQs, like here. So we get at the endpoint, then call a list of this. So if we check our endpoint, let's open it and check how that works. So I'll just copy it and paste in my browser. Okay, so you see how the request comes. So what you'll be getting should be something like this. So once you have this sign right here, like the open bracket, not the curly braces, and the close here, it shows that that is a list. So that is why we are using lists here. So we have call list, then the response, and this is the response that I did. So once we add the retrofit dependency which we added here, and the JSON converter, once we add the retrofit dependency and the JSON converter, retrofit converter JSON, it will enable us to use the serialize name, so we can serialize the name. So this is the name that is coming from the API, and this is the one you'll be using, these ones with the white. So this one you have to be very careful, it has to match with what you are seeing on your payload right here. So you can see we have the name, the score, the country, and the batch URL, and everything has to be the same here. Should in case you add maybe S here for countries, when you are making the request you have an error, and your logcat will point you down here that either the name is null or the name is not correct. So if you find out, you can just easily remove that and fix the issue. Then once this is done, you're done serializing it, just call it here. So from here we go to our client, call the API services, then we can go to the fragments. So this is the skill IQ fragment, which you know is a RecyclerView. So we had to do the RecyclerView adapter for it. It's the normal RecyclerView adapter. So this is the name for the adapter, recycler.adapter, then the adapter name plus the view holder. So down here I have written my view holder, which is this. So the view holder inflates the skill IQ items, and this is the layout that controls the skill IQ items. This is the layout that controls the skill IQ items. So we just have a card view as the parent view, the constraint layout that has a padding of 4, the image view for these skill IQ images, the text view to hold the name of the learner, the text view to hold the score, and the country. So that was how I designed the skill IQ items. So we have the text views here on the bind view holder. So item view dot the name, item view dot the score, and dot the country. Then here is the interesting part. We use glide here to load the images from URL. So if you check from the browser here, the batch URL as an image from Cloudinary. So to be able to load this image perfectly, you can still load it with any other way, but I like glide because glide will just give you exactly what you want. You can check out other ways you can load images. So here we just did glide dot, and note that you can't use glide if you've not added the dependency for glide, which I had already shown you, which is this, the glide dependency. So once you've added that, you'll be able to bring in glide dot with the like a sample image you have. This is the image view that you have designed, then the image coming from the URL that you've mapped on your response class. Then this fit center just helps when the app is loading up to the screen, go off the limits you want it to be. Okay, so to just experiment that, I will remove these and run the app for a little while. So once the app is done, you see how it is. Yeah, so as you can see here, how the app is showing, the images are showing up because they are bigger than the views, so it's cutting some part of the app. So to just fix that is to return it back to fit center. So fit center just makes the image to be positioned in the center of the view, so it just wrap itself inside the view. So I believe you have gotten that right now. You see that the image has returned back to its normal shape. So that's all for the IQ, and the same thing is done for. Okay, so once we are done with the adapter, we have to go to the main fragment now. So we are using a RecyclerView, so we call a let init var RecyclerView, then a private var the adapter. This is not used, so then let init var the layout manager, which is what will help us position the image as it is. You know, in RecyclerView we have many other views. We have the grid, we have the staggered. So here we are using the layout manager horizontal, which is the default. So then moving down, we see we've declared recycler here, so we just initialize the recycler here by calling the RecyclerView that we have created. So you can see that in our skill IQ fragment we have a RecyclerView, the layout carrying the IQ items, which is just the items I showed you that carries the image, the name, and the text view that carries the country and the number of hours, and that is all. Then we added a text. So you've not really seen this text how it works, but if to say that the items here are empty, you will just show. Okay, I think when the app is loading, it shows. When the app is loading, it shows that nothing to show yet with the RecyclerView. Yeah, exactly what you are saying. So when it's making the API request, the progress bar and this text shows to show. This is the progress bar to show that there is nothing there yet. Then for instance, if to say there is no item to be returned from the API request, then the progress bar will disappear and the text will show. So you've seen we use the progress a RecyclerView here, then a progress bar and a text to show if there is no item, or then show the list of items. So going to the implementation, we have the RecyclerView initialize, we have the adapter initialize, then the layout initialized. Then we just bind the three of them, the RecyclerView, the layout, and the layout manager. Then we call the retrofit request. So val service equal to retrofit dot create, then the retrofit interface. So we now val equals to service, which we've declared here, dot skill leader, which is the name we gave on our retrofit request right here. So going down, this is the progress bar that we did on the view dot, because when it's on the view it was set to be hidden, so it's hidden. So when you get here, so this is the progress bar that you declared on our XML. You just set it to visible, and the text visible while it's loading up the recycler view. Then this is how we make the requests. So call, which we initialize here, .enqueue, call back the list of response. Then on response, that's once the request has been made, so call this data class that we've done. So if the request code is equals to 200 or the request code is successful, is the same thing. So you can either use request code that is successful, it still work, or request code that is equals to 200, because once the request code is 200, it means it is successful. So once the request code is successful, then the recycler view, the progress bar should disappear. The empty text that was showing nothing to show yet should disappear. Then the list that is coming from the adapter should now show. That is just what is happening right here. So just add the list of learners or the list of IQ leaders. So here I just did a little thing while I was working. So at first instance the list did not show, so I needed to see why it is not showing, so I just did a little of logging. On failure, fortunately or unfortunately, if while loading something happens and the app crashes, so or nothing is coming from the API but it fails, so we should just make the progress bar disappears and the empty text will be visible to show that nothing is there to show yet. So that's just the walk down of what that does. And same thing applies to the top learners. As you can see, the adapter is the same thing, just like the skill IQ. Nothing has changed from the adapter to the array of response down to the bind view holder, which has the add items and the notifier. So I may not have spoken about the notify data set changed. So what this does is that, for instance, we have this list right now, and if you are working like in a school portal which students can get to register on a daily basis, so what this does is just once there is a new data updated on this list, so notify the adapter that there is a new data, and once the adapter is notified, you will just add it to the list of data that we have on this list, show what has been added. Simple. And that is just it. This is the same thing. So then you have it on the top learners fragment. So if you see, everything is the same thing: recycler, adapter, layout. We initialize the recycler, initialize the adapter, the layout, and add the three of them. Then we initialize the API interface, then make the request, and everything is just the same like I explained earlier. And once that is done, you don't have any issue. So if you have any issue here, it might be that you've made a mistake mapping this. Maybe you didn't use a list, because it has to be a list, because from what we saw here, it's returning a list. Once you see this, it means it's returning a list of all of these items, so it has to be a list right here. If you didn't use a list, you have an error message coming from the API. Then another thing that might cause an error might be if you made a mistake on your endpoint here. Maybe this is supposed to be skill IQ and you made it to be skill IP, you will have an error. So any mistake you make will give you an error, so you have to be very careful while you are working on it. So the two explanations are just covered what we have on this screen right here. So I'm not sure there is a thing I've not explained on this particular screen here. I've showed you how to get this, showed you how to implement the tab layout, and I've showed you how to implement the view pager to help you swipe from one screen to the other. Alright, so let's move to the submit. So moving to the submit screen, so we have to move down to the submit fragment. Then moving to the submit fragment, we are to come from the API layer or the API interface. So since it has to deal with fields, input fields, we need to use form URL encoded. Then it will be a post from what we were given on the doc. Yeah, so you see, to make a network post, so it means the request is a post request that we are to make to be able to send the data, to insert data in this form. So going back to our code, we have the post, the response URL, which is the link to the form that was given to us right here. Then the base URL is what we added to our Retrofit client object class, which is this. Then you have to be very careful not to make mistake here too, because any mistake you make, even if this line disappears, like the last slash there disappears, it's going to give you headache that you never imagined to get. So take note of that when you are working with any URL response. So since we are posting to fields, we have the values here for the email, value for the first name, value for the last name, and value for the link to GitHub, to the form to link to GitHub, which are these forms. So this value has to tally. This value has to tally with what you have been given, else you will not be able to make a request to that endpoint. So you have to check if you are having any error that these are the same and perfect to be able to use that. So you have to use the void here, but it's a form, but the way to implement that is to use a void on the network call. So it has to get any object that is sent here. As far as the ID matches, it will accept the request. So that's all about the API services. So moving to the submission fragment, let me open this up. So here we are moving from submission fragment to dialog. So I did I implemented the screens for dialog, which is what I added here for dialog. So we have 3 dialogues, which is 1, are you sure? So if I open the XML, so you see when it says are you sure, with this drawable that I got from Android Studio. So I just imported that from Android Studio drawable resource vector assets. So from here you can get all the drawables you need here. So you can see this, and the question, downloaded the question mark to use right here, and this is the text view. So walk down here, we have a card view here as the parent view that has a width of match parent and a height of wrap. So it has the card corner radius of 20 dp, it has a CAD elevation of 3 dp. It has a minimum width of 280 and a maximum width of 280. Then it has a constraint layout inside of it to show the views, which we have the text view, the image view for the question mark. Then we have the text view for the button. So I use a text view for the button. If you can see, I added a background drawable. So if I can open a background drawable, so you see how it is. So this is created from Drawable. You can just right click on Drawable folder and create a Drawable resource file. So you get here. So once you get here, you have only selector. So I added the items, the shape to be rectangle. The solid color is the color showing in the middle of it here, white. So if you want the middle here to be maybe this yellow, so it means you have to use the yellow here. So you can see the yellow is showing there. So on doing that, you have that. So for now, I needed the color to be in the middle to be white, and the color surrounding it, like a line surrounding the border line, to be this yellow or orange color. So I use the yellow color there. Then I give the width to be 1 and the radius to be 5 to curve the corners of the button. Then I gave a pad. This now depends on the kind of button you have, so you can then decide paddings you can give. So you can play around with that to see how it works. So right here I use a text view here as the button, and you can see how the checkout, so you see how it looks. Just entering dummy data, and so you see everything now shows perfectly and fine. Alright, so let's see the dialog now and how they're implemented. You can see I'm using a custom dialog here. I'm not using the normal dialog because I was just thinking of something to use to, maybe if you've not used it before, you now see how to write other ways, other dialogues in other ways you might not have been used to by now. Opening the dialog, you see that I'm using a dialog fragment as an extended fragment here, and everything looks like a fragment. So another thing here, for the dialog to show perfectly as what you are seeing here, you need to add the windows.featureNodeTitle to it. Then require dialog.windows.set background drawable to be transparent, set style no frame, like the borders there, and the style theme. So you can play around with that and see how it works. Because of time, we won't go deep into that. Then the little implementations I've done here is this img close is for this close button. So what I did here was, once the close button is clicked, it should go back to submit fragment. Then when it goes back to submit fragment, as you can see, if you check here, you see that those fields have disappeared that we inputted. Let's go back so you see. So the fields now are showing. So if you click on the submit, the fields disappeared, including the button. So what I did there was I did a group view. Let me open it up so you see. So I use the constraint group widget to put in all the views we have here inside the group here, and then once we move to the other screen, let's see that. Yeah, so I called it view. You can give it a view group or any ID you want to call it, but I just called it views to show that it's all the views we have here. So I did a companion object, which I've explained already. Then I declared a function for it and added the activity to be fragment activity dot view, which is the ID of the views we have in that XML, dot visibility equals to gone, which means anytime you call this method or function, the views here will disappear. Then anytime you call the show, because it is set to visible, the views there will show. So that is just the tiny tinkling trick that is used here. So once you go back, the views show. Once you click, the views disappear. Then when I was working on this, going back, the views will not show. The views will still be disappearing. So I had to write some custom codes on the dialogues. So if I go to are you sure dialog fragment, you see what I have done here on start and on destroy, on destroy view. So once you start the view, which is on start, it hides the views that were in submission fragment, and once this view is destroyed, which means either you are going back to the submission fragment or you are moving forward to another dialog, which could be the success dialog or not successful dialog. So but once this view is destroyed, it will show back what was here. So that is just the trick that is controlling this. So if you go back, it shows. Once you click, it disappears. So you have seen how that is done just by doing this and calling it in on start of the activity we are going to, and on destroy view of the activity you be either coming back to the submit fragment or something. So that was the same thing that was done when you click the close button, it shows back the views. So now another tricky thing is when you click on the yes button. When you click on the yes button, it's supposed to execute what you have just entered in those fields. It's supposed to send it to the form that you were supposed to fill, send it to the spreadsheet, or just make the API request. So what I did there was did a little tweak interface here, just like an on-click listener, but I called it yes dialog clicked. Then I I got a little method to get the selection and then make a JVM field. This is just to observe the fields you'll be clicking, whether yes or not yes, and then call it. So I called this method here on the submission fragment, which is what we have here. So once this is called, you now you override a method, which is the get selection that was declared in here. I believe you understand that. So once I created this interface, I added a fun get selection, and it's an empty constructor. Then once I call this interface in any fragment, it will override this get selection method for me without anything in it. So these guys will not be in it, but anything that will be inside here will be what will be executed. So here what I wanted it to do was, I have a progress bar, which is once I click the yes button here, is supposed to send a signal. So I'm clicking the yes button here. This is the yes button. Once I click the yes button, the yes button will send a signal, like will observe where this method was override. So once it overrides, it observes that it handles the request. So you see this method that is here is handling the HTTP request that is supposed to send those fields to the remote repository or the form or the spreadsheet that is supposed to send it to. So I just did a method here and added the retrofit request and made the call. So if it is on failure, the recycler view should disappear. But once the response is successful, don't mind this, is when I was using activity before I removed it and used the navigation component. So when the call is successful, it should move to the dialog that says submission successful, which is this. So you can imagine how we did this. So find navigation controller is what controls the navigation.navigate. This is like an ID which we have declared in our main nav graph. So I believe you still remember this. So from the main nav graph, it takes us to this screen that says submission successful. Okay, so let's go back to here. So the thing is a bit tricky right here, but if you try it out over and over, you see that it is very simple to implement. So just clicking on the yes button here, you will observe this interface that I have created right here, and this interface interacting with this companion object that I created. Then it sends a signal here and the progress dialog starts showing. So if I show you what happens here, so once I click on yes, it comes back to the submission, and if it is successful, it shows here. Then without me clicking anything, but I have set validations on this, so if nothing is typed in any of it, or maybe I skipped any one and then wanted to click the button, you see that it shows. So if I add here and skip the next one, it will still show. Okay, so you've seen that. Let's see how we can get the not successful page. So the only way I can tweak that out is to like make a mistake on the base URL, so I can remove those two things. So I'm removing the / and the E. Okay, so I'll run the app and test it out, so you see how that works. Okay, so our app is done, so let's test it out. I just enter default things, doesn't really matter. Then let's try it out. So at the moment it's not really showing us any good response as per what is causing the submission not to be successful. But from what I logged here, you can see that it's showing a printout that submission fail is equal to null because I used the response body here. So this is exactly where it is reading submission fail and why it is failing, not saying why it is failing. But if you're having that same issue and every other thing is correct, so you know where to find your issue is start from the base URL to confirm if it is correct. If your base URL is correct, you can go to your API service interface to cross check if this URL also is correct. If that is correct, you check if the entry here is correct. So if the entries are correct, then you go back to your fragment and check. Maybe you may have made a mistake, but if any of this is null, it will show that it is null. But since none of those are null, that's why it's just pointing out down to the response. So I believe you have learned something from this, and this is how I validated the fields for the first name, last name. So once you click the button, I added the fields in it. So when the first name is blank, it should show this error message and set a focus to that edit text. So that's what the request focus here does. Then if last name is empty, maybe first name is not empty but last name is empty, it should show the error and focus it to where the error is. Return the button. That's exactly what it does to all of them. But if all of them are filled, then call this. So this is where we make an intent using the find navigation controller to go to the are you sure. So if you can see the ID here, it will take us to the main nav graph, which is this. You can see the arrow here is to show that you are moving from this screen to this screen right here, showing by the arrow. So also something we might have missed out is that before we are able to make the are you sure dialog to be able to like relate or communicate with this submission fragment, we had to add this. This is like initializing this dialog using this method here. So this is like initialize the clicks that will happen there to this fragment. So once this is initialized and the interface is override, then you can be able to pass data or make them communicate between each other. So if you have any question, anything that you don't understand, check me out on Twitter or LinkedIn. So if you check my repository I shared here, you see me. Check here, and there's something you don't understand or you want to ask the question about something, you can file an issue or get me directly on Twitter or LinkedIn, or better still, you can use my email, which you can find it from here to get to me, or you can chat me up on the Slack channel. My name there is Utibe. If you want to get me on Slack, I'm one of the mentors on Slack. I'm Utibe Timidward. My username is Utibe. So you can chat me up and I'll be happy to answer most of your questions about this walk down of the project. Thank you. I hope you enjoy. You are free to start the repository or fork it, or if there is an issue, file an issue and let's fix it. Thank you very much.